Hi everybody, Ronroy here, and today I want to talk about my Dark Pact build update. With that, I pretty much pushed my DPS to be much higher. And right now, as you can see on the screen, the build can literally kill Uber Bosses with bypassing stages. So you don't really need to dodge Impendable Doom or balls on the Exarch anymore. With that amount of damage, it feels much better. I also would say that survivability rised too, and the build feels much more stable. I will go into the details about what I have changed, what we will need to do, and what kind of upgrades you can do as well to make the build much stronger. Let's go and look into it. First and probably the biggest change was the change of Amulet. After a lot of additional tests, I have decided to go for the Blightwell Amulet and took off my Eyes of the Great Wolf for a time. Right now, I think it's a pretty stable version and it should feel much better. You will ask me probably why and how it works, why I decided to do that, and you can pretty much see it on the screen right now. To maximize DPS after we'll get all the bonuses together, I think Blightwell will just work better right now. With the previous version of the build, I think you can still use the Eyes of the Great Wolf, but with the updated version that I'm showcasing right now, I think the Blightwell will just work a little more stably. So as you can see on the screen, I just don't drop my health at all when I'm using the Blightwell. It's good, because to maximize DPS in the updated version, you really need to always stay at half. Before, it was a really bad idea, because if you will use Blightwell with a basic version of the build that we already showcased, it will be a pretty big issue. You will stay at the full health most of the time, and it means your recharge could be stopped, which is definitely not a good idea. It usually stops when your reserved life go a little over your current life. Also, we needed to stay at the low life itself to just get the spell damage bonus from Pain Atonement. Right now, we can pretty much get the bonus constantly just by using Petrified Blood. So with updated version, with Petrified Blood, I think Blightwell should work pretty well. The main reason why I decided to go with the Blightwell was the change of the approach to the jewels itself. Before, we were able to get enough recharge at jewels, but since we are dropping a lot of jewels just to get a new Adorned and Corrupted jewels into the build, we are losing a lot of recharge and we just don't have enough anymore. That's why the Blightwell right now is such a good option with the updated version if you are going for the Adorned. Going a little deeper into the whole idea of Blightwell against the Eyes of the Great Wolf, I would say the best thing here should be the Arcane Parison. With Blightwell, we can get the corruption, you can apply additional cures on the amulet itself. That way, we don't really need to get Whispers of Doom anymore. It's really strong thing. We can just use our Annoyed to pretty much annoy something else. I have decided to go for Heart of Darkness. It's about 8% of DPS, and it's a pretty cool bonus. So Blightwell with a Heart of Darkness leaves us with only 10% less DPS compared to the Eyes of the Great Wolf. But we will constantly have enough recharge. I would say the Eyes of the Great Wolf combination is still playable, but I prefer Blightwell instead right now just to make my DPS much more stable. Perfectly, as I already mentioned, it should be corrupted and anointed with some additional damage passives such as Heart of Darkness. So talking about another big change for the build, it would be the Adorned Crimson Jewel. Right now the Adorned is a really amazing way to stack even more health, and it works pretty well for the Dark Pact, because that way we can also get critical strike multiplier for the build, and as a crit based build it helps a lot. With the Adorned, we will need to look for a few different breakpoints. First, and the main breakpoint should be 143%. Since Adorned always round down, we need to break some points on the Adorned itself to make sure that we are getting enough bonuses. 143 is a breakpoint for 7% life. Since we are going to roll 7% increase maximum life on most of our jewels, 143 is a sweet spot that we need to achieve. If we can't, for some reason, I mean, if it's like too expensive for you, you can go for 134% instead. That's a breakpoint for 6% life. That way you don't really need to aim for 7 and you can just try to get 6% life on all of your jewels. It will be a budget version. But right now, for the best returns, I recommend to go for 143, because it's a sweet spot for 7% life. Talking about magic jewels that we will need to use. At the most situations, you need to aim for critical strike multiplier, increase maximum life. For budget version, you can go 12% critical strike multiplier or 13%. For more expensive one, you can go for 15% and 7% increase maximum life. If you can get increased damage on top or something like that, it will be really good. Another huge thing with Adorned would be the technique that makes us to get immunities in a different order. We don't really need tolerance anymore and we can drop it all together and get rid of evasion master as well. Because with Adorned, we can get immunities in a different fashion. If we are able to get a really proper basic jewel like that. So at the jewel itself, we need to roll chance to avoid being poisoned and chance to avoid being bleeding. Doesn't matter which will be on top. You can go 25 at top for chance to avoid being poisoned and 33 for bleeding, as I have it right here, or you can go for it vice versa. But then, Adorned will give us additional bonuses. As you can see, it gives me 80% chance to avoid bleeding and 61% chance to avoid being poisoned. On top of that, I can just add chance to avoid being poisoned on boots, and together with my murderous eye jewel in the belt that I already used, that gives 22% chance to avoid being poisoned and 22% chance to avoid bleeding, we are getting a complete immunity right here. You can pretty much hit right here, bleeding is 102 and poison is like 120. It's working so good. So you can try to get jewel without life, just with chance to avoid being poisoned and chance to avoid being bleeding. Just remember that all jewels should be magic and corrupted. It's pretty much important for Adorned to work out. That way we can save some points from tolerance and things around there, and from evasion mastery and get our immunities back. So talking about another thingy that I added to the build, it's pretty much Voices large cluster jewel. I have tried a few different cluster jewels approaches, but Voices still showcase the best results. I honestly think that whole update should still be pretty affordable, so I went for a really cheap Voices, only with 5 small passive skills, which grant nothing. Such Voices cost only 2 divines, and it adds chances to use 3 different corrupted jewels right here. It's a pretty good option. If you are going for Voices for 3 small passive skills, you will pay 200 to 300 divines right now, and you will save only 1 small passive skill point. I'm sure that 1 passive skill point don't really worth 300 divines, so I don't really recommend to go for it. If you have an amazing budget like a few mirrors, you can go for 1 small passive skill, but it will be really expensive. Otherwise, you can pretty much feel good with 5, and there's not a lot of point to go for others. However, I think 5 it's a pretty good addition to the build, and you can just use 2 here and here. It works so well with the Adorned itself, and it can showcase a really good results. So talking about Petrified Blood, it was pretty hard to fit it into the build itself. I tried it previously and I wasn't happy with the results. But right now, since we currently still need to have half of the house to get pain attunement working, it's pretty important to have Petrified Blood in the build and to make it work. So, to compensate the Petrified Blood damage over time, which is not reserving our health, but damaging the health directly, we will need life recoup. Usually, it would be alright with 30% of recoup, but currently, after all my tests, I decided that 32 is probably a better number. That way we're always getting our health in our right position and we can't die instantly because of any mistakes. So to get that amount of recoup, I'm taking 3 points right here, so 1, 2 and 3. It gives us 20%. And on top of that, we can use implicit on the Val Regalia. I rolled like 13, but you can roll 12 or even 11. Just more than 10, so 11 would pretty much alright. To make it more stable, I would say 13 or 12 is pretty much a good position. So 13 for Val Regalia implicit, together with 3 points right here, gives us enough recoup to just get rid of all damage over time from Petrified Blood. It works really well. To make sure that your Petrified Blood is not reserving too much health, you can always use Enlightenment as well. Go for level 3 since it's much cheaper, but if you can afford it, you can pretty much go for level 4 as well. I tested it with level 3 just to make sure it's working at the lower time of investment. Just make sure that you always have enough recoup. So 3 points and implicit on Val Regalia. Or you can get 13 points somewhere else, such as like a ring buff, or maybe some kind of QoL as well. However, I really recommend the implicit for Val Regalia since it's pretty easy to get, and I think it's a better option. With Petrified Blood, we're getting much more survivability. As you can see in Path of Building, it's about 33%, and after all the tests, I would say it's closer to 25, but it's still more survivability. It works pretty good, and it makes sure that we're always at low life to get pain attunement working. So even when we are casting, we are staying at the low life. So talking about the changes of the tree, I don't really think that those changes are pretty much significant, but we still need to change few points around. The most important part was dropping the Melding right here. We are not really benefiting from maximum energy shield, so it never worked good. We were receiving only a little health here and there from it. I just moved life mastery from Melding point here to quick recovery point here. We still need to take quick recovery, even if it's not really amazing, just for the life mastery. So make sure that after update you will still have all life mastery nodes here. And on the other hand, I'm also dropping some 6% increase maximum life. In that case, if you will not have voices, you can go with normal cluster jewel, and instead of 2 points here, just take 6% increase maximum life. I also think that pretty much that jewel right here will be a better option than going for 6% maximum life. It just works better. It gives 17 increase maximum life and 34 critical strike multiplier for spell damage, which is pretty nice. That way, I think it's much better to drop it. But if you don't have enough corrupted cobalt jewels with critical strike multiplier, you can drop 1, 2, 3, 4 points and take 1, 2, 3 and 4, for example, to just get more life. It's not a bad option and it should work in many different cases. So overall, these are still keeping the rest of the tree. The only changes on top of that we have, we are going not from there, because we are taking intelligence here, and we are going from the STR to the left. That way we have much easier access to the slot right here, and we are taking more STR up there. So I think it's just better way right now. So it was my build update for Dark Pact Pathfinder. I think build is a really good position right now after the update. Some parts could be a little more expensive and it's pretty much an endgame push. However, it can kill Uber Bosses much easier right now, and I think build is stronger than ever. We will see how it will play out further, and thank you very much for watching. See you next time.